Okay.
So class, my students in this class it's a typography class, and they are second year students, so they have a grasp of Illustrator, Photoshop, and InDesign.
Nice.
And I shared your book with them at the first of school, sharing it again. But Karen Jimenez-Elliott holds a BFA in graphic design from Moore College of Art and Design, and an MFA in Museum Exhibition Planning and Design from the University of the Arts. But she wrote this book, and I reviewed the book over the summer, and I was very impressed with the book because she's a creator of typography, an author, but also a graphic designer. And I'm the same thing. I'm not only a teacher, but I'm a full-time designer, and I have a love of typography. So there was a kindred spirit there that, and I reached out to her, and she agreed to be our guest speaker today. So I'm going to turn it over to her. And at the end, if you have any questions, we'll let you ask some questions. And please put your phones down and everything and pay attention today. Even though she may not can see all of you, I can. Okay, take it away.
Okay. Robin, thank you for inviting me to the class. I hope I'm not too rusty, but I have been out of the classroom. I've taught for 18 years full-time graphic design at Johnson & Wales University, and I've taught as an adjunct at Salve University as well as Philadelphia University when I was getting my master's. But I have been out of the classroom for the last year and a half, just through medical leave, but I have been designing since. And so you'll have to excuse me if I am a little rusty. I'm assuming that after 18 years, it's like riding a bike and I will be fine. But if I slip up, that is why. But thank you for having me in the class. And I put together a presentation, just talking points, really. And I'm just going to share it with you. And if you want to interrupt me, like throughout and ask me questions, you're more than welcome. Or if you wanted to wait till the end, that is fine too. So I am just going to hopefully share my screen here. And I apologize. I have not one, not two, but 3 dogs. And so I am hoping I have the 2 that are rowdy in my room with me. So hopefully they do not start barking at any point. Let's see.
Well, I hope we don't have another fire drill. So we did in the first class.
Okay. Are you seeing my screen? You are?
We are, yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm not really familiar, in all honesty, with Teams. This is like, I've only used it maybe twice when I was on university faculty council. It's not something I am familiar with. So I just want to make sure that you are seeing what I'm talking about. So again, hello, I am Karen Jimenez-Elliott. I kind of already gave you my background. Like I mentioned, I am really just kind of giving you maybe design advice as well as personal/professional in becoming a successful designer, at least things that I would tell my students all the time. So one thing that I'm going to talk about is just process throughout. And so this is just a little bit of my process of my own logo and my own mark. And as I mentioned, I have 3 dogs, and you will see a reoccurring thread throughout my presentation of I love dogs, maybe on the level of obsession, but so you will see that sort of reoccur. I'm going to start off with just the difference of refined typography and amateur versus designer. And I think this is really important it becomes more and more relevant as technology keeps advancing. So we have things like Canva, and everyone thinks they're a designer nowadays. And I'm sure that you may be asked to even sort of design within Canva at certain times. But there's a huge difference between being a trained designer and someone who just picks up sort of, an intuitive template software like Canva and designs something or designs, a brochure using a downloaded template. And so I'm just going to kind of talk about those differences and why you are more marketable than Canva, okay? And why you're more valuable. So I'm going to reference the book a little bit, but I'm not going to go into in depth with it, only because I know that you already have an intro to a lot of things, and I don't want to be repetitive of what your professor has already sort of gone over. But again, just the introduction of principles of typography and why it's so important. Things that I would always talk to my students about in all classes that I taught are being able to articulately speak about typography. And so not just saying, oh, this particular font, I liked this. Or, I'm creating this custom lockup and I want these two elements to sort of connect. I want you to really understand the anatomy and the language within typography so that you can articulately speak about why you made the choices. So if you're talking about font pairings, which I'll get into, I chose to pair this sans serif uniform font that's based on geometry and perfect circles with this slab serif, and this is why. Or, this descender here, I wanted to create sort of a lockup, so I connected it with, the arm of the ampersand. So you need to sort of be able to talk articulately about why you made choices. So font pairing, I just sort of briefly mentioned. Font pairings are not just about, choosing the right fonts that stylistically go together, but also the right fonts that make sense for the target audience that you're designing for. So I find that a lot of times in freshman, sophomore year especially, and then things start to click right around like sophomore, spring semester, I feel like, for most people. But a lot of times people default to using lots of different fonts within a book or a poster to create that typographic hierarchy or visual hierarchy. But you really want to, and there are times that makes sense. But typography is all about and graphic design is all about understanding the rules, and then you can start to play around with breaking them. And for different reasons, But find a font family that's really well drawn. So for the book, I chose Proxima Nova, but things like Futura, Proxima Nova, any of those, like there's, a ton. But if you look at those, they have lots of different options within the font family so that you're not choosing a condensed font for when you want a condensed font. You're not choosing a bold extended for when you want that. So try to find a font family for body copy and subheads and different things like that when you're working with your book, or if you're working even within a poster or a website. And then you can pair it with, maybe a little bit more decorative or ornate font for headlines if you wanted to. So these are just things to think about. The other thing to think about is what you're choosing the font pairings for. Like, what is the assigned task? So most of the time when you get freelance or you're in a design firm, you're not designing for you as an audience. You might be designing for, say, 40 to 60-year-old women, or you might be designing for pre-K to third grade children. And so you have to think about what is appropriate for the audience, what is legible, what is your readability in something. So all of those things. And then what is it going to be is it going to be adaptive, like as you go from maybe expanding the brand into web or an app as well as print. So you have to think about all of these things when you're designing. And I might be, validating some of what you've spoken about. Again, people are welcome to interrupt me along the way. Other things that are so important along the lines of terminology and anatomy and understanding is spacing. And when I refer to spacing, I am referring to kerning, leading, tracking, like all of those things that, again, really will separate you from a trained designer versus an amateur designer. So just referring to, the 1998 example that's on the page, kerning and tracking is basically established by the widest letter form or character form in a font. So if the spacing is, set for a 0, clearly a 1 is much thinner than that 0. So that's when you end up with something like this, where the 1 is sort of looking like it's over in left field. It may be technically the same measurement within your default in sort of your character window of kerning, but visually it is not equal. So you have to go in there and adjust those things. Other things that really separate, amateur versus trained are appropriate leading. So, if you have something that is so tight in your body copy, like most fonts default to 2 points higher in leading than the point size. Sometimes it varies, but that's generally about what it defaults to. But depending upon the font and how you're using it, it would be, you can start to have ascenders and descenders start to collide, or it just creates a visual tension. So for instance, with the book, if I remember correctly, I did 11-point font because it's a sans serif font, and sans serif fonts tend to be drawn a bit larger than serif. And so I did an 11/15, I believe. And so that way it just creates a little bit of space and it's easier for the reader to read. So things like that where leading gets too tight or too open, and the same fact where it feels like each line is its own thing versus from a paragraph. So just paying attention to those things. And again, once you understand the rules, there's definitely times where you can play around with really tight leading to create a tension intentionally for something that it might be appropriate for. But again, understand those rules. I know you're working on your typography book. Line length is another one that is huge. So if you are working, as I have here just with a visual example of a 3-column grid, you want to make sure that you have an adequate gutter in between the columns. You want to make sure that you could go, you can expand and have 3 separate columns. You can have your text column for certain things. You don't want to be too repetitive in your books, or in books, I should say, in book layout. You want to have cohesiveness, but you also don't want to bore your reader. Like have, a grid that is versatile and you can really sort of vary up a bit while still staying true to sort of the visual brand that you've created. So there might be times where you have the text column span the text box span 2 column widths, but you wouldn't want to do what I have in the third example with an 11/14 leading, because that's really cumbersome to read and your eye actually has a hard time sort of, once you get to the end of that line, tracking back. There's obviously exceptions if you have really wide margins and different things like that, but general rule is you wouldn't want your small body copy to do that. And I know that as high schoolers and everything else were taught in Word to I was probably one of the last classes to take type on a typewriter. And so there was a reason actually that you hit the space bar twice. It was to advance that arm over to start the next sentence, but we're in a digital world and you don't need to hit 2 spaces after. So there's just things that come from old school thinking. So we're taught to have, term papers and they're just edge to edge. But when you're designing, you need to sort of think outside of that. I know it's hard to make that switch for some people. There's appropriate times to have type obviously expand or span the whole width of a page if the type's big and it's, a headline. So these are just things that really separate that. Other things are your hyphenation, your rags, your glyphs, and ligatures. These are huge. Um, a lot of people are like myself. I tried my very best when laying this book out to do a force justified with last line, left align, and people love using it. But a lot of times you can tell when someone isn't refined in their typography because you'll get down at the bottom there these awkward gaps and rivers and spacing within that. And it's all just about point size, your tracking, and then going in and really adjusting that justification setting within that window. And lastly, before I get into sort of like the main presentation, are just your glyphs and ligatures. This is huge. So making sure that, you know, your ligatures are turned on, your smart punctuation, so that, you know, things like the F and I are really common, or the F and L, that those are turned on and you're not getting awkward spacing. And then your smart quotes, again, you know, smart quotes are your curved quotes that are for quotations. And then if you have those straight up and down, those are for identifying measurements like inches and feet. So you just want to make sure that also you use your glyphs if you are referring to inches or feet and you're changing them. So just all those things, insetting tabs, making sure that you're using the right font if you're knocking something out so parts of the letter aren't disappearing, you know, that you don't have these like orphans and sort of runts at the end of paragraphs, and that you're using soft returns when re-ragging things and you're not using that hard return. I'm sure your professor has mentioned this, especially when you get an InDesign and you're doing a book and you're working with character styles and paragraph. If you hit that hard return when you're re-ragging something, you're going to end up telling the software that it's the start of a new paragraph. So you just have to make sure that you're getting in the habit of doing all of those things. Are there any questions on that? And that will be sort of my lecture on principles and stuff.
Does anybody have any questions? Not yet, so
Okay.
continue on.
Okay. I also have one question. Can you see me talking, or is it just my screen?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
you can. I wasn't sure. I
Yeah,
was like, okay.
your inset is a little bit smaller, but they can see you and see the image area.
Okay, I can't tell, and I talk a lot with my hands, so sorry.
That's okay. I do too.
Okay. Moving on. So sketching, iterations, and feedback. These are huge. So some people, I think they get really caught up with sketching and thinking that, you know, it has to be this precious, you know, realistic rendering of the font. It doesn't. It just has to convey composition, layout, and ideas. I would tell I don't know if you have a requirement in your class, but I would tell my students, I didn't really care what format they were sketching in, as long as it was a dedicated, you know, notebook to it, or if they wanted to sketch digitally and, you know, using their iPad or something similar, they were welcome to, but I just didn't want it on like the back of an English paper. Like, you know, like I wanted it to be something that they could go back and reference. So sketching is huge. Iterations, you know, do as many sketches as possible. And then I was never a person that was like, it had to be 50 sketches or it had to be 25, because as long as you're working through ideas, rather than hitting a required number was a thing for me. And then I would have you, you know, choose maybe your top 3 to 5 and start digitally executing those. And then do multiple iterations of that. Try different fonts, compositions, type pairings, whatever it may be, illustration styles. And then lastly, feedback. I would tell my students that critiques are so important, and the critiques can come from non-designers like your roommate, your family members. They can come because a lot of times you're designing for non-designers. So it's important to know, you know, what their thoughts are on something. And sometimes we get so close to what we're doing that we don't see obvious things. So it's really important to show your work to non-designers, peers in the classroom, professors, whoever will look at it, just to get feedback. And the other thing is having confidence in what you do, but not having an ego. Because I have found that people having large egos with design, it prevents them from being open to constructive criticism and from becoming better designers. So always be open to criticism. Don't take it as like a personal attack. Just take it. And sometimes you won't have a art director or a boss maybe deliver it in the most kind way, but you just have to, develop that bit of a tough skin and realize they are talking about the design and not you personally. So that's my little lecture on that. These are just some examples of thumbnail sketches, which you've probably seen from students of mine. Sketching and process and critiques were something huge. And I still do it when I have freelance work. I have sort of a small network of designers and stuff that I will, text my design to and be like, hey, can I get some feedback? So even, all these years later, I still am asking for feedback. And one thing that I was pretty known for when I was teaching is digital presentations are great for final presentations. But I really liked, for those sort of in-process critiques, printing out wherever you are at in the process or like at that point in time. And if I was teaching in a classroom that had, all of the glass windows, we would literally just tape it up. And I would dedicate more than half the studio class, and I would just have all the students, I would say, take a pen, pencil, whatever, and I want you to hit every single student's printout, and I want to see feedback. Because just telling them like I like it is not helpful. If you want to tell them why you like it, that might be helpful. But so it's really great to sort of have people write and draw on it, because then you also have that as a takeaway to go home and look at, process, and then sort of think about, not that you have to make all of the suggestions that are given to you, but if there's something that's like important with, legibility or something, then like, yes, you have to address those. But some things that might be just a personal design aesthetic, like, I don't really like purple, I don't think you should use it. You don't have to necessarily make that. But different levels of sketching here and marking up. And again, some people would go through and they would, draw out each letter form. That's not necessary. If you're into that, great. But as you can see in the bottom left, like even just drawing out key letter forms for composition, and then just having lines to represent body copy and visual/typographic hierarchy are sometimes all you need. So get feedback and have people mark up your stuff as much as possible would be one thing that I would recommend. So again, and then once you get into iterations, another thing that I would do is I would have students print out and we would pin it up in the hallway. And again, they would go through and present, but it was a bit more informal, so they could go up and people could still like get right up close to it versus looking at a digital slide. And it's easier to look for cohesiveness when everything's lined up. So these are just tips, again, that I would recommend doing. Again, digital versus like pen and paper, pencil and paper. Once you get into iterations, so this is like some of my work I'll insert here and there. You're in Galveston, right?
We're right in between Houston and Galveston, okay. So a little bit north of Galveston.
Okay. So I know that that's close to the water.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I live in Rhode Island, and I actually live on an island off of Rhode Island. So if you've ever heard of Newport, which is like a big touristy seaport, um, I live on the island, Aquidneck Island, which has Portsmouth, Middletown, and Newport. So I grew up in Pennsylvania in the middle of nowhere, and I then lived in Philly for, I guess about 9, 10 years. So sort of nautical life was very new to me. It might not be new to you, but so I have developed an understanding of just boat life. Not that I have my own boat or I'm of that caliber, but so a lot of freelance work that I get is actually for people that have boats or sort of are in that I guess, community. So this was for a logo for a boat. And then these are all just different sketches. So I started up here. I don't know if you can see my cursor. Can you see my cursor? Oh, you can.
Yes.
Okay. So I started up here, and these were like pencil sketches to digital iPad sketches, and then just moving through. And it might not look like at a quick glance that there's a lot changing, but like it's me literally changing. Is it a beach? Is there a fire on it? Is there an umbrella? Are there Adirondack chairs? What's the placement? Do I do a dock? Like all different things, and just moving through. And I already knew at this point that they wanted a sans serif typeface. So that was, so now I'm just playing around with different typefaces, and then all lowercase versus combination and different things. But you want to work through, once you get to this, after the sketch point, of just as many iterations as you can do. So this kind of just shows lots of options. Doesn't mean you show them all to the client, but you work through those. So iterations. Any questions on that section?
Any questions? Would you? I have one. Would you suggest students choosing a color palette when they do something like this, or get through the iterations and etc. before they nail down a color palette?
That is a great question.
I don't talk about that a lot.
No,
typically,
I would always talk about that with my students. So when they would do their font posters or logos, anything, I first work in one color. So I was working just in a navy blue instead of black to start. But it's so important to just focus on the design elements and composition and typography at the point, and eliminate other factors like, is it the right shade of orange? Is it the right shade of blue? Like, are they working together? So I would always tell my students, work in black and white first, because all logos need to, in their simplest form, work as a one color black logo.
That's how I was taught.
Yep.
And that's kind of what I pass on to them, that make it work in black and white, and then it'll work in color later on. So
exactly.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So moving on, I can't emphasize this enough. These three things: design with purpose, give context, and be cohesive. So I will explain and show these. Design with purpose. Be intentional with every choice that you make. Don't just design a pretty picture. There are times for that, but when you're designing, like, try to put meaning. It doesn't mean that it has to be this super deep meaning into everything, but like, there should be a reason that you choose that specific color. Orange, I'll stick with that, versus something else, because that orange isn't too yellow. And so then it will be more legible and can exist on a white background. Like, find a reason for everything, and so that you can speak to it articulately, and also that your designs have meaning. Give context. So I'll show examples of this later on, but very rarely, I can't actually think of any time, do you just design a logo without context. It's not ever going to exist just isolated on a page. It is going to be, the sign on a brick and mortar store. It is going to be the favicon at the top of your web browser. It is going to be the icon of your app, or it's going to have a purpose and context. So I knew in this case that they wanted to have zip ups and hoodies and pillows, and they had a young child. So I'm showing them how the different logos can exist and how they will live. So you always want to give context, even if it's not for a client, but it's for yourself, because you can see what the challenges are visually. That in your head, how many of you have probably designed something and you're like, it works so beautifully in your head, and then the minute you design it and you start to apply it, you're like, oh, this isn't working the way I wanted it to. I thought I was just designing a logo. Nope, I need to design like a whole brand identity with, a left alignment option, a centered, whatever it is. So give context, and then again, be cohesive. So you always want to think about, even if something is for an app that you might be designing, you always have to think about, well, what if they decide to do apparel? What if they decide to do a brochure or a printed annual report or a banner for like a tech trade show they go to? You have to think about how it's going to work across all different media. So I will talk about this with sort of the general branding. Again, thinking about just cohesiveness and creating that mark. So I'm going to walk you through a brief, sort of a little bit watered down, just for the sake of this, one of my process presentations that I would give to a client. So again, this one is for a boat that was bought and was to be used for transportation within New England. And they came to me with the name Butterfly. And so the first thing you should always do when you are given something is visual research on what has already been done. So to show the client that there are a million butterfly logos out there, I just did some quick visual research, some snapshots, screenshots, and just kind of loaded up a page so they could see how many butterflies are out there. The next thing that seems like a daunting task for us, especially in the digital world that we live in, there's like your generation that just grew up in it, and then my generation, so I'm going to be 46, and my generation we grew up before internet. So I didn't get my first email account. My first web class was only HTML, and we're talking 1999, which some of you might not have even been born yet. So it seems like a daunting task in our sort of social media and digital and Canva worlds of how do we create something original? And that can feel really hard, like even to myself. But one thing I always would tell my students is 90% of a designer's job is being a problem solver. How do you make your logo stand apart from competitors? How do you come up with something unique if you're designing something that is packaging? How do you create strong shelf presence? So all of these things, or if you're redesigning something, like how do you keep their brand equity and their existing, customer base, but elevate it and not upset. People don't like change, and you will learn that. So that can be hard. The next slide I showed my client was that I looked into what does a butterfly symbolize. And on the right was I asked for the schematic drawings of the boat. And the minute I saw the boat, I was like, it reminds me of the structural anatomy of a butterfly. So my brain instantly started designing. And then I looked at some anatomical drawings, and I found this really awesome 1915 butterfly guide book that was online. And so I just took a screen capture of anatomy of different butterfly wings so they could see where my logic was coming from. And then I wanted to create a mark that I personally love logos that you see, and whether that they have multiple sort of layers, and whether you get it right off the bat, it's still a great logo and seems appropriate. But then if you see that next thing, you're like, oh my God, that's so clever. And so I love logos like that. And so that's what I wanted to do for them. So I did a vector, just simple vector like interpretation of the boat, my own illustration of the anatomy of a butterfly wing, and then I worked to figure out how do I get that boat in the butterfly wing. And so then I made like the circle that's at the, the smallest or the center there, representation of the sun, and it's the boat, and the lines that are coming down are the waves. And whether someone else gets that or not, if they like, it still works. It's still a butterfly. It's an abstract logo, but it's also kind of literal. And if they all of a sudden see that boat, they're like, that's awesome. And so that's the type of logos and marks I like to create. So this was sort of my process so they could see where I was coming from. Having done work for them, I knew their style. I branded some other stuff. They love uniform line weight. They love the colors from their existing brands. So I did one that incorporated sort of representation of all of their different sort of entities, and then one that was just more like blues and teals to represent water, and then just a softer, elegant line work. So then I just start going through iterations. I know that they like sans serif typefaces, so I had the luxury of getting to at least stylistically what they wanted quicker. I'm working through, do I use the full wing? How do I use it? How do I incorporate it? And then I decided to try a font pairing with a uniform line, like a monoline script. So again, appropriate font pairings. It wouldn't make sense for me to try. So the line weight of the icon is uniform. For the most part, there's very little varying thickness within the fonts I'm choosing. So it just wouldn't make sense for the script stylistically to be this sort of like calligraphic, thick and thin. To me, scripts are really hard to incorporate because they can either go wedding invitation real quick or they can go, in my head, 80s nail salon, which you don't want. So it's always like trying to find that balance in, can you incorporate a script or hand done font? And then does it match? Then context. So I am showing them just different ways the graphics can be applied to the boat. And again, I am gaining all of this knowledge of boat community that I never had before. So this company, they use a lot in boats for water bottles because the diameter of the container fits the narrow cup holders in boats. So I just demonstrated to them how the logos can evolve, whether it's something that they did, on a coffee cup versus, whatever the beverage container is to water bottles, and just showing them different options. The other thing I know is apparel for the crew, for whatever. So doing New England's weird. It can be 90 degrees in one point of the day, and it can start off 38 degrees with like just, the water being surrounded. So showing them custom patch on embroidered patch on sweaters, as well as how the brand can evolve on boat pillows. Having known this is for entertaining as well, coming up with a fun little like acrylic bar sign, barware, and just like simple cards and stuff like that. So, any questions on this one, actually, before I move on to the next?
Any questions?
I have a question. I have a comment. I like the like where the dots are, the dot placement, like it almost gives like one or
Oh yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, she's making a comment of how you put the circle or the dot in there, and it represents the something on the boat as well as the sunshine, as well as something on the butterfly.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Thank you. Anybody else? No.
Anybody else? Proceed on.
Okay. Another example is just, and I won't go as in depth as the prior one, but just to kind of show you. So I was asked to do a branding and brand guidelines for a women's healthcare app that's specifically for tracking menopause and tracking like all of these different things and symptoms. And there are different correlation or different connections between symptoms of women with menopause and like things like Alzheimer's and all of these things. So it was a organization that really wanted to track this stuff. And so they came to me and said, we want an H logo. We don't want to do the typical sort of like sterile medical, colors that you associate, like blue, red, and those sort of things that are pharmaceutical. And so after reading their mission and learning about like how the app was going to work and how it was going to track certain things, I started just sketching by hand, and then I went into digital iterations, looking at everything from, a medical file folder to sort of lines suggesting like health and statistics. I went the whole abstract way of I looked into different like animals or species that represent like change and like positive things, and I found the sparrow and what that means, and like evolving and different things like that, which also made sense. So I showed them everything from abstract to literal, everything in between, the dots of, the app screen, how it would load, just all sorts of options for them to look at. So they could see that I did my homework. And that way, if they're like, oh, I wonder what this would look like, I could be like, oh, I tried a version of that. Here's what it looks like. So again, tried all different versions. Ultimately, this is the logo that they ended up choosing. And so again, creating that brand identity for multiple different uses. So it is an app. So first and foremost, I need to think about that app icon. Very legible font, because this is an app. It's also for women specifically that are of perimenopausal and menopausal age. So you're looking at an older audience, and you don't want the font to be super small, have thicks and thins. And so I had suggested this sort of fuchsia and orange after looking into some color theory. So this is ultimately what logo was chose in the direction of it by the client. I loved some of these better, but again, at the end of the day, you have that to show in your portfolio, but the client is the one that is paying. So these are all of the different logos that I provided for them for all different uses. So you're not just designing like one mark, but you have to think about how it's going to be used, all different positive, negatives, as well as like black and white. And then I found royalty-free imagery that they were able to, purchase, that they can use for their campaigns, that goes along stylistically with the brand that I started to create. So this is just a brief brand guideline that I gave them, and I don't have all the pages in here because you didn't need that, but to show then, again, context. So first and foremost, they were working with a developer to develop the app, so I just had to do the app, icons and things like that. So they could decide on the brand, I just showed them, I knew that they were going to be doing like Instagram and social media campaigns. And so I just put together like, these are the images that I'm suggesting, the taglines, and then the different elements and how the logo would work, from a watermark to the type, and just creating that style moving forward. It can be super extensive, or for me, I donate a ton of my time and designs to animal welfare organizations. It's something I'm super passionate about. And so on the island, there is Potter League for Animals. And I have a 12-year-old son. He'll say 12 and a half. Sorry, he's 12 and a half. And at the shelter, once you reached 6, I believe, 6, you could go in and start volunteering with like small animals. So I started in person with him, volunteering multiple days a week. And then once COVID hit, that changed, and I started just designing for them when they would need things. So it can be something, again, as simple as just creating a logo that is going to be on a poster, a digital poster. And so in this instance, they were doing an event, Pints for Paws, and she wanted me to create a logo for it. And so again, just showing a bit of my icon process, like, okay, here's a rendering of a pint glass. I want to incorporate a dog. Looks a little awkward. Ears are too long. The third one, a little too complicated for the icon. And then just simplifying. So again, showing process to clients, your professors, whoever, is key. Any questions, sorry, on that?
When you go back to the app you were designing, did the client ask for up front? Did you know you were going to be showing them Instagram and other possible layouts, or did you do that to show them how the icon would work once they had chosen one?
They initially just wanted me to design a logo that obviously in its simplest form, the icon as well for the app, but I just know that clients need to truly understand if the logo is going to work. I wanted to show them it in context, and I didn't want to actually design or mock up an app and have them get caught up in maybe my layout of the app not being what they think, or you know what I mean? So I figured, I know that they're going to do digital ads, so I chose to come up with mock-ups for Instagram ads that would swap out the imagery to show them how the logos could work. So, and they loved that idea, and then they had me source imagery and that sort of thing. So I found this imagery first. I didn't purchase it first. I knew they didn't have really a budget for like a photographer yet, so I sourced out royalty-free imagery they could use for what they wanted, and I found an artist that took the photos in the colors I wanted, the style I was looking at for the brand, and had a pretty broad range they could use. So no, they didn't ask me to do that. I chose I always show context, even if it's a business card, I always show them something.
And I do the same thing. That's why I was asking, because I tend to give more than what the client has asked for, so they'll understand. And you mentioned several times that, well, I already know this client likes this, and whatever. And I think if you do learn your client or ask enough questions to know sometimes knowing what they don't like is as important as knowing what they do like. And I have learned clients over the years that I would know, just don't even show this. Yep. It's not going to go anywhere because I know they won't like it.
Yeah.
But I also learned early on, even though I like, a whole bunch of designs, that I'm never going to show them one that I don't like, because odds are they may pick that one. Yep. And then I have to work a bunch more. And I'm like, Yeah. But but client has the last say always. So
yeah. Anyway. We really are connected, because that is exactly what I tell my students all the time. One of the things, the first question I always ask clients, even if I've worked for them before, because sometimes, it's for something else, what don't you want? Like, what colors are you not wanting to see? Because a lot of times, more than not, clients can articulate what they don't want versus what they do want. And so it's your job to problem solve. And exactly what you said, and I'll say that for portfolios as well as options, don't ever show them something you don't want, or don't ever showcase in your portfolio a project that you wouldn't want them to remember you by, because it's in our nature and in the industry to just be visually, we're always paying attention. Like, how many times have you probably been driving and you're looking at the back of a truck that's branded and you're like, oh my God, I could fit a whole other letter between that, those characters, or like, this doesn't even make sense. Like, and so you sit there and you critique logos, and it's just what we're meant to do. And so you don't want someone remembering you by your weakest project. Make your weakest project, if there is one, still amazing. Put in the effort to like make it as strong as you can. So yes, I couldn't agree more. So I have 2 more sections. How am I on time?
It doesn't matter. We have 3 hours. So,
well, I won't take
the
up
class
that much.
is 3. Yeah.
Okay.
It's 3 hours long, so we don't really have an end.
Okay.
That we're not working toward a bell, in other words, or whatever.
Okay. This one is super close to who I am, and you can interpret this and what I'm saying into your own passion. But one, I know I mentioned Canva in the beginning, and a lot of times, like, it's just interesting. Like, when I was coming out of school in undergrad in 2003, what they would pay for a logo versus now is just night and day. And it's because of things like, where they're like, oh, but I can just download, this from Shutterstock and just type in my logo, and then I have a logo. And I'm like, yeah, but anyone can do that. So that same logo can exist out there, amongst how many companies, or with Canva, like I was saying. But you are marketable, you are valuable, and being a trained designer makes you, you are worthy of being paid, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and paid your worth. So yes, you need to get paid, but even within that, if you get to a point or along the way that you're able to make a difference with your designs and your talent, try to do so. And it'll become a little bit clearer what I'm talking about. So one thing that I wrote in the book, and I think I kind of touched on it just a bit ago, was a lot of people just think that being a designer is making a pretty picture or a brand. And having taught in a college of engineering and design for a long time, and being part of that, a lot of sort of very analytical majors like engineering and stuff like that, they don't always take designers as being like serious, like we're just creating pretty things. But I just showed you lots of examples of it takes thought, it takes a lot of talent, and training to create and be a good designer. So don't let anyone else like diminish that for you. Design can educate, it can advocate, it can unify, it can protest, but design has power. And as a designer, you wield that power. And so try to find ways of making a difference with your talents. I know I have a whole section on designing for social impact. And there's a lot of things in there, from people that are political, are animal welfare. Politics can just be exhausting. So I'm not gonna talk about any of
Absolutely.
that. Yeah. And I'm definitely not here to talk about that. But there's other things you can do to design for social impact. I mentioned I have a bit of an obsession with dogs. And so early on, I realized I'm a teacher. We don't get paid a lot. So I can't, or I can't speak for you, but as a rule, teachers generally don't get paid a lot. So when I would see these, things that I wanted to donate to, I didn't really have the extra money to donate. But what I did have was a talent for design. So I would reach out to organizations and pro bono, and they welcomed me with the biggest open arms, because a lot of these are nonprofits and they have limited staff and they're all doing a million things. So I would say, hey, I want to help you raise money. I can't donate, but what I can do is I can design you something for a fundraiser to sell, like a t-shirt, whatever, to make money. And so I started doing that regularly with Potter League for Animals that I mentioned before. So this spread is in the book, but they came to me and they said, we have the saying, the heart of a humane community. Can you maybe do that for a tote bag? They wanted a new adopt sticker, and their most common animals are rabbits, dogs, and cats. They wanted those to be on it. And at the time, I guess this was a few years ago, and there were 2 dogs that were found that they named Gravy, and I think the other one was Turkey. It was right around Thanksgiving, and it was a pretty heart-wrenching story, but it really touched me. And so when they asked me to design the adopt sticker, I had taken a photo of Gravy right there, and used him as my inspiration for the sticker. So I try to use people's animals and different things like that. But again, I can give back that way. Something I also do, and I'm still doing, actually, I owe them a t-shirt design this week. I've been doing it for years, is I rebranded their Heart and Soul Walk for animals. It's one of their largest fundraisers that they make a ton of money on. And so again, I can't donate, but I can make them money. So I would donate my design services. Every year they do a pride shirt. And so I've done a ton for them over the years. These are just 2 of them. And the director that I've gotten to know there, she is also a creative. So sometimes she comes to me with direction, like, I'm thinking of this, but you run with it. Other times it's just, you run with it. And so the thing is that when you're doing a lot of pro bono work like that, it can be really fun and a creative outlet in a world where you might be going to an office every day and having like these rigid things to work within, where it's some creative freedom, and usually it is so appreciated. So these are just some designs, again, that they're selling to make money on. I had always been sort of involved with Italian Greyhound rescue. So I had Italian Greyhounds way back in the day. And I lost my 17 and a half and 15 and a half year old. They were, lived a long life. The first few months of COVID, which was pretty brutal. And after that, I started really paying attention to sighthound rescue. And so I started following some accounts, and one of the accounts, and this woman, Carrie, who runs Candy Sound International, like some people, are celebrity struck with like actors and stuff, but I got to meet her and I was like awestruck, because I so admire what she does. And so I reached out, and she rescues ex-racing dogs from Ireland and England, but she also rescues a lot of dogs from the China meat trade, which was a whole eye-opening experience. So I couldn't donate, but I designed this shirt for her, this graphic for a shirt as a fundraiser. And then through that, I started a connection with Bring Portuguese Podengos to Light, which helps ex-hunting dogs, Podangos, out of Portugal. And so I've just developed this community, and I've designed new logos for people, like graphics, whatever. Just again, because it's my passion. Pet Rock, which this is the recent poster. They're in Massachusetts, and they do a whole festival in October every year. And they've asked me, every year they use all of their proceeds to help with animal welfare, but of all different types of animals. So that's why I kind of have a lineup there. And their motto is "They can't talk, so we will." So this is these are the graphics that I created for this year. For Potter League, this is one of my favorite projects every year. So they came to me, and there's a brewery on the island called Rejects Beer Co. And the first year are these cans right here, and they were gonna Rejects was gonna donate a portion from every sale of the can and from the draft to Potter League. So I was just told, run with it. And Rejects is this edgy like bar, and they own a few different restaurants. So I took their 3 animals that Potter League has, their colors, which are orange, teal, and sort of this green. And I came up with just these crazy illustrations of a dog, cat, and a rabbit. They gave me the Ale Whiskers Rebellion, and, put the logo on each of the hats and everything. After that year, they realized we can make even more money, and we'll auction off as a fundraising item someone's pet to be featured. So that's when Cosmic Crosby's Comet came about. So that was last year's, and that was the winner, Crosby. He was like a mini Sheltie mix. And then this year, this is from this year, and it was Good Boy Bo. So again, you can see I'm showing you a lot of clean vector stuff, but I can kind of do whatever. And that's something that I'll mention at the end. But don't pigeonhole yourself. Make sure that you're varying up your portfolios so people don't think you can just do one thing. So any questions actually on that section? And then I'm kind of in my last section.
Any other questions? No? Yes, sir. Oh, Jeremiah?
I was going to ask, my mic on the blank. Okay, I got it. I was just going to ask, is it hard to sort of deal with clients that may want you to create them something that goes against your morals or beliefs? Because I know that's you're a designer, you got to do that task, or maybe you don't have to accept it, but then again, that's still money that's being thrown away.
Maybe the question is, have you ever turned anything down on principle or ethics or something like that? I know I had a client I worked for that I had a hard time eventually representing things he did, and just resigned the account, and it was personal,
Yeah. So one, that is a fantastic question. And yes, I have turned down a few things. Even if we weren't in with the online presence that everyone has now, and everyone has, because obviously you can do something, and now your name's out there and it's associated with you. Even if that weren't a factor, I still have turned down things. And I've worked with the client freelance wise, saying, it was for an animal organization, but they wanted me, not Potter League, but they wanted me to brand a cookout / picnic that was going to be in South County, Rhode Island. And the terminology they wanted me to use for the name of the picnic, I was not comfortable with. And I told them, especially just having been from growing up in, the country of Pennsylvania, I knew you don't need to it could be interpreted poorly. And I just said, if you're willing to change the name, these are some ideas. I'd be willing to design it for you. And they just weren't. So I said, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pass. Because I do think it's really important to keep ethics.
Yeah.
Again, without getting political, like you should really not compromise your ethics when you are designing something, because you have to realize that even if you're designing it for a company, like, you are associated with it. So I know it's money, but at the end of the day, it's also an extension of you. So personally, there's no amount of money, even though I don't have a lot of money, there's no amount of money that I would take to do something that I feel is just really against who I am. So, yep.
Thank you.
No problem. So I am going to tell you to find your passion. And you might not find, like, it might take you a while to get there. But you should find your passion within design. But for me, obviously, you know my passion after sort of sharing this with you. So find something that, as a side, because some of you are going to be really lucky, and you are going to get a job right away that maybe incorporates your passion. Not just design, but like another sort of like larger passion. Like maybe, I don't know, like you're big into women, advocacy or women's rights, or like something or helping children, and you land a job at like the Boys and Girls Club as like a designer. Like maybe you find, and you're lucky and you find that, but a lot of you are probably going to work for either an in-house company, or you're going to work for an agency that might take on a variety of clients, and it might not be soul filling, you know what I mean? But it's just design, and I think it's important to keep your creativity where you don't have the constraints, and also feed that passion outside of your sort of corporate job. So find your passion. Mine are dogs. And so in 2023, in March, I was like, you know what? I don't have the facility to have a dog rescue, but in the same mode of thinking of like, I can't donate my own money, but I can create designs to help raise money. I spoke to my partner in this organization, Carla. She was fostering dogs out of Kuwait at the time, and just we were talking about sort of the costs associated with fostering and all of the medical needs and just different things. So from that, my son's name is Grayson with an E, and on a conversation, we developed the Grayson Hound Foster Fund, and that was like in February or January of 2023. And then I was like, we need to figure out how to like make it an official 501c3, which is a registered nonprofit with the IRS. And that is so so far outside my comfort zone. I'm a visual thinker, like stuff like that makes my head hurt even thinking about doing it. But I figured it out because it was for a larger cause. And at the end of March, we were a registered 501c3. Everyone said you needed to do it with a lawyer. And I was like, nope, I can figure it out. And I did. And this is our website. Is it this like groundbreaking thing? No, but I also have to pay the bills with freelance, and I was teaching full time, but it was enough to educate people and everything else. So this is our website, which, talks about our mission, has some slides of dogs we've helped. And then a lot of people will ask like, well, why are we helping fund organizations out of China and out of Portugal? And we do help in the US as well. So I know you're doing infographics. I design these infographics with some heavy content, but in a way that's approachable. And not, I like to use the Sarah McLachlan commercial, the Sarah McLachlan effect of the ASPCA, where it comes on the TV and you're like, I can't watch. And I didn't want that reaction from people. So infographics, shop, everything. And then this is my son, my friend Carla, and myself. And she's really creative. She designs a bunch of resin work. I obviously illustrate, and we make all of these products, and we're like proud to say that 100% of our proceeds go towards rescue dogs. And we've just grown and grown since March of 2023. Variety of products that I've designed and that we sell for a variety of audiences. And because of that, this is just a small fraction of the amount of dogs that we have helped rescue from Portugal, Ireland, England, China, Kuwait, here in the States, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, like all over the place. And so I just kind of like got goosebumps looking at that slide, because again, it's about finding your passion. And I'll share one little story that still is like the most heartwarming story. As we were at last December at an event at a brewery with our tent, and I have 2 whippets, and you don't see whippets very often. They're kind of like a little bit smaller than a greyhound, and unfortunately they use a lot of sight hounds because they're really strong, obviously for racing and fast, but they're really muscular. So unfortunately we help a lot of them out of the China meat trade because of that. So in walks 2 whippets, and of course, me being a crazy sight hound lady, I'm like, oh my God, like 2 whippets. And I introduce myself, and I start talking to her, and she said, oh, we just adopted this one dog from Fast Friends in New Hampshire, which is another organization we help. And she's from China, and her name's May. Her name was Mira. And I was like, well, when did you get her? That's crazy. We help with transports. And she was like, 3 months ago she came in. And my brain is like spinning and spinning. And I was like, wait a second. We helped with that transport. And I run over to our booth and I bring her over there. And we have this About Us page with some pictures of the dog. And this dog right here that we helped from China was standing in front of me in Rhode Island. And I just like welled with tears. I'm getting goosebumps again talking about it. But I was like, oh my God, if there was ever a full circle moment to like, I'm in Rhode Island, like the tiniest next to Delaware state. And turns out this lady, Amanda, lives 10 minutes from me in Tiverton, Rhode Island. And she is standing there with a dog that we had helped from China and saved from the China meat trade. And so, again, I can't tell you enough. Like, just find your passion. It'll fulfill you in so many ways. And use your skill set for it. Like, obviously mine's dogs, but it can be anything. It can be political activism, social injustice. It can be anything, like absolutely anything. So I'm going to leave you with a little bit of advice, and these are things that I have told my students over the years and things I wish someone would have told me throughout my years as a designer. 1, don't be so hard on yourself. I have to tell myself this even now at 45, almost 46. But don't be so hard on yourself. There's a lot we cannot control in this world, as you know. But we can treat ourselves, but how we treat ourselves is something we do have control over. And I'm going to put my glasses on because I'm reading, my computer's a little far away. 2, be confident and always willing to learn. So again, confidence versus an ego are very different things. Egos will prevent you from being open to becoming a better designer. 3, there will always be someone that is better at what you do. Doesn't matter how long you do this, there's always going to be someone that's better than you, but don't be discouraged by it. Use it as inspiration and motivation. Identify ways that you can improve while still being you and doing your best. I know sometimes, just having taught for so many years, sometimes a student that is super talented, people will just almost be annoyed at that it seems to come so effortlessly for them. But don't be annoyed at that student. Like, hang out with that student, see how they work, look at their process, like, be encouraged by it, be inspired by it. Don't think poorly of them or talk bad about them because they seem like they're overachieving. You know what I mean? Like, software didn't come easy for me when I was a student. Things just didn't come easy, so I had to really work at it. And so sometimes it's hard when you see somebody that it just seems so easy for them. And you know what? If you talk to them, it's probably not. It's probably not. It's just your perception. As a student and as an employee, oh my gosh, show up prepared, passionate, and on time. So much of being a successful employee, a successful, just honestly, citizen, but successful student is just showing up and being there. A lot of times, if you don't show up because you're afraid that you didn't maybe do all of what was asked of you, then you're building on that anxiety by, like, now you're behind again, and now you're behind again. So just show up prepared, passionate, and on time. Having confidence comes from being prepared. 6, diversify your portfolio. Like I mentioned, vary your color palettes, fonts, aesthetic, deliverables, and target audience. Don't pigeonhole yourself. 7, be open to constructive criticism and don't take it personally. 8, you will learn more from your perceived failures than your successes. You've got to trust me on this. Things that are successful, they're great. That's awesome. They feel great. But think about it even on the smallest, like some of the smallest scale. Like, if you're struggling to figure out how to do something in software, chances are you probably remember it better, right? Like, because you had to work through it. And a lot of times what you think is a failure, give yourself like 2-3 years, you're going to realize it was not a failure. It was just your perception of failing. 9, let go of absolute perfection, please. Embrace the motto of imperfectly perfect. Try your best. But I am like queen of typos, man. I swear, I am just queen of typos. And if you are that, have a million people look at your stuff. And the minute you think something's final, like how many of you, first of all, never name a file final. Don't do it. The minute you name it final, you're going to have a final 1, final 2, final September 11th, September 18th. Like, don't do it. Just name your file by the date is what I've learned to do. Because you'll always find something. And trying to be perfect, it's exhausting and it's unattainable. So please just do your best. That's all you can do. And lastly, design has power, like I mentioned. So as a designer, you wield that power and use your talents for to create positive change. The one last thing, I'll add 11 to this, know yourself. So I have ADHD with inattentiveness, and I would tell my students I have like the attention span of a gnat. So if I'm working on something and you know like what's going to be a distraction for you, know how you work. So give yourself the time or the environment to be efficient in working. If you're a person that needs to sort of, like, I was never good at working in like a coffee shop or like the hallway waiting for classes, because it's just my brain was like listening to everything and I was like squirrel, like just bouncing all over the place. Some people can just tune it all out and it's white noise and they are really productive in it. That's awesome. If you're not, like, know yourself and give yourself the atmosphere to work, to be efficient. It'll just make your life easier. And that is it. So
Thank you
yes.
so much.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you. Do you want me to like leave this up in case I need to go back to anything, or do you want me to turn my screen off?
We can do that. Does anyone have any questions for Karen? Yes, Shayma?
I'm very curious about the ad for the woman. She made it.
The app, the H app.
Ad.
Oh, the ad. Oh,
Yes.
this one. Yeah.
This one. So I don't know, but the socks draw so much attention to me, and I think it's a great flow to the app store. I was wondering if she changed the color of the socks, or it was that color and she decided to go with that color of background to balance it out.
Okay.
Did you choose the background to balance out colors that were already in the image, or did you edit some of the colors in the clothing of the models in these royalty-free images?
So I did not edit the colors in the photos. I knew that they wanted a bright color palette based off of obviously these colors that they ended up landing on. I showed them lots of color combinations of varying depths of, pink and orange and that sort of thing. And then I just really looked for imagery that I felt complemented what I had done and what I felt would sort of, I guess, allow and showcase the brand I had created and how it can live is the best way to describe it. And so I thought fully that I was going to probably have to go in and edit whatever imagery and like crop people out. And I was willing to do that for them, like moving forward, because I think that this only had maybe like 3, I think honestly this image, which I love this image, and then this were the only ones. I might have changed the orange on that slightly. I think it might have been a little bit deeper. Those were really the only 3 that I felt really worked with the brand that I had created. But I had told them, I'm willing to also go, like, this is to start. And if you get the budget, then I can also art direct a photo shoot to sort of match stylistically, or I can also create images that stylistically match by cropping, subjects out and putting them on different colors. But I didn't want to spend a ton of time showing the initial context because it was just to sort of relay how the brand could expand. Yeah.
And by the way, I love the way the H is, transparent. You can still see the imagery behind it and through it. And it's just a beautiful presentation.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Karen? I can't thank you enough for doing this. Your time is so valuable, and I know they learned a lot. I did as well. And did you say you taught at Salve?
So Salve Regina University is in Newport.
My son graduated from there.
Oh my gosh, get out of here. So you're very familiar with where,
I know exactly where you are.
That's a
Yeah.
very picturesque place to go to college.
Yes,
So if
yes.
you know the carriage house, that's there. I actually, where the gallery is, that's where I taught. So I taught there for a year as an adjunct, and oh my gosh, my son this had to be 2014. I think it was 2014. And so my son was about a year old. So I would work full time in Providence. And then I would come home briefly sometimes, or I would go straight to Newport and teach a night class there. And so I did that for, I think it was only a year. They had talked about bringing me on full time, but it just financially like didn't match what I needed. Sorry, my dog just like hit my table.
Okay.
And so it just didn't financially, like it didn't match what I needed. And so I wasn't able to go there. But yeah, Salve is only about like 20 minutes from me on the island.
Okay.
So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, thank you again so very much, and thanks for allowing me to record it so I can share it with future classes, or we can have you back maybe.
Yeah.
And I hope.
Yeah,
I hope you
sorry. I really appreciate you inviting me, and also like all the compliments and kind words on the book. I know that when I was reached out like by the academic publisher to publish and write a book, I was like, oh my God, I don't have the attention span to read a book. Why do you want me to write a book? But my whole point in the way I designed it was really about like jamming it full of content and information and visual examples, and making it, approachable for visual learners like us. So it means a lot that it's helpful to you. And, I have a few professors reach out, and it's also nice to be kind of, even though I'm not in the classroom, it's nice to be back in the classroom. It's something I do miss. And I did tell Robin, I'm not positive I can make it happen, but my brother does live in Spring, Texas, which is right outside of Houston. And so I'm potentially looking at a possibility of maybe coming and visiting him in November, early November, with my son, and potentially maybe popping into your class for a critique or a visit. So I will let you know if I can make that happen.
Yeah. Well, have a great day, and thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.